Okay, what I would like to discuss today is how to create some highlights on objects without having to totally re-render the scene and relight a scene. So one of the things that happens quite often is once you get a scene made, okay, like this little scene, this is a project that my students have to do. It's a texturing and lighting problem, and the students done an excellent job here. So, but one of the issues that bother me about this, and when you approach creating things, you can kind of approach it from as a photographer. So you're trying to shoot something to look real, but then I also approach it as an illustrator in which I have a specific look that I'm after. So in this particular case, these spark plugs that the student made, this white ceramic piece to me is way too dull. It needs to pop off of this. I quite often go back and do an actual pass, a specular pass that I create just simply for the actual pieces themselves that I want to punch. A lot of times it's glass, like I have a specific highlight I want in a specific place on glass. But in this case, I wanted to come in and pop some highlights on these pieces of ceramic. So there's a way to approach that. So go in here into Max. And what I'm going to be doing is creating a specific shader. And what we're going to do is come into our material editor, and I'm just going to make me a new tab, and we'll just call this specular, and then I'm just going to create, we'll just use a physical material, which is really fine. So what we're going to do is we want a black material, and we're actually going to make two of these, and the first one's going to be matte and the other one's going to be glossy. Okay, so back for the matte one, I don't want any reflection at all, and I'm going to turn the roughness all the way up. On the glossy one, I'm going to have a reflection all the way up, and then I'm going to adjust my glossiness and do a couple different renders based on different settings in here. Okay, so that's my two materials that I'm going to use. Alright, so now another thing that we need to do here is, I'm just going to pull my material off the screen here if I can get Windows to allow me to do that. Okay, so what I need is I'm going to hide everything that I don't need. So in this case, I need the spark plugs. But I have to also notice in this case on the spark plug that this part of the spark plug is passing behind this piece. Okay, then I'm going to actually open this up. So I'm going to actually select both of these, and then I'm just going to hide everything else. So anytime that we're going to put highlight on something, you have to pay attention, because if it's occluded in some way by another piece of geometry, as in this case, then I need it to be in the scene also. Okay, so if we just do a quick render of this, we'll see this is what it looks like. Alright, so what we're going to do here is, we don't want to be able to see this at all, so what I'm going to do is assign this black matte to it. So that'll make it so that it renders as a negative space. You won't see it, but it's occluding and going to be in front of that piece. Alright, then for our spark plugs, I'm going to put this on it. And then what that's going to do is produce a totally black render with only the light hitting that surface. Okay, now I've got active shade on, so we can make adjustments to this. So as I adjust this roughness down a little bit, then I'm going to get a hotter specular highlight. So what we're initially doing is going to create some render passes that are using the lights that are in the scene. So this right now, I think I'm going to make this a little bit narrower, maybe something about like that, and then we're going to render that out. So I'll end up doing these passes and do a couple of different ones, because then I can stack them in Photoshop. So basically what we're going to be doing is we're going to end up render this out, save it out, and then when we take it into Photoshop, we're going to put it on a screen setting, which means black becomes transparent and the only thing that will show up is the white. So I usually do 2 render passes. I'll do one in which that I have the highlight fairly small and focused like this. So it's a really, really hot highlight. And then I'll do another pass in which I add a little bit more roughness to it, so it gives me a softer kind of highlight, and then I'm going to stack those two together. Okay, so I've already got those rendered out into Photoshop, and we'll go over and look at it, but we're going to do a couple more also. All right, so what we're going to do now is I'm going to adjust that back so we get something about like that. Okay, then I'm going to close this active render. So I'm going to turn off our wireframe, and then I'm going to, instead of going to performance mode, I'm going to go to standard mode, and then you will be able to see the highlights from your scene. Okay, so what I'm going to be doing here is I'm going to pull up the light lister, and then I'm going to turn off all of the lights that are in the scene. So what that'll do is when I render, there'll be basically nothing now. Okay, but now I'm going to put my own highlights in here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here and I'm going to create a photometric light, a free light, and I'm just going to click in my viewport, and let's hide all the other lights. All right, so this particular light, I'm going to want it to be neutral, so I'm going to get a Kelvin of 6600, which is white, and then I'm going to want to really kick up how bright it is. Now here's the trick. I'm going to go to our alignment tool, but we're pulling down to this one. This is place highlight on surface. So when I have the light selected and now I click on the surface, and we need to change this to high quality. And so with that photometric picked and then clicking on this, click and holding down, then you can place a highlight exactly where you want it. Now this highlight's not very bright right now, and that means I really need to come over here and kick up the intensity. And so I can adjust that again and get it right where I want it, which is going to be right about there. That's the highlight I like, but I can do multiple of these. So I'm just going to go ahead and clone it. I have it selected over here, so it's going to give me a second one. And then I'm going to go with it, and I'm going to click and place it to place a highlight on this one. And then I can do the same thing several times. Clone it again. This one over here. I like that pretty good, and I might even try one more. And then I'm going to click right in here, so it's going to give me the highlight for the rest of that. So that looks pretty good. So then I could render that out. And then I would do the same thing. I would render one pass where it had a pretty broad specular like this, and then I would pull it down tight where I'd get a very narrow kind of specular like that. And the reason I do that is I want to be able to get the highlight, so one of the passes is a broad kind of lightening of the surface, and then one which is a really hot specular into the center of it. So just rendering these out and then saving them, and then we're ready to go over into Photoshop. Okay, so I have some of these already stacked in here, and so here's a before and after, a before and after. And so all I'm doing is I'm opening up one of these, and then I'm dragging on top of this, holding down the shift key so that they line up with each other. I'll put that up here. Okay, so there's what I'm putting on it, and then I turn it to screen, and then it'll pop that highlight on there, and then I can adjust my opacity to it. I can also do masking on if I want to. So in other words, let's say in this particular case I didn't like this highlight that was on this, I just wanted the highlight on there. So then I can come in and I can paint, and I usually don't like it to be 100% opacity. I like to build it up. And so I can paint over this area, and I can mask that out so that only my highlight is going where I want it. And then if I don't like that, I can always, delete the mask. Okay, so here is some examples. So here is okay, so this is the one that is the lights from the scene. I've got another one in here. I'm sorry, this is the one that's lights from the scene. So that's the lights that came in from the actual scene, but now I'm being able to pop them hotter because of the material I'm putting in there. So then as I screen those over the top, let's go here. So in this case, on this one where I'm putting these over the top, I also put a levels command on top of that, because that will allow me to adjust how hot that is. And then I have another one that this is these really hot highlights, and this one is the broader highlight, and I moved it around. So I'm apt, based on where I move the light, I've been able to create multiple highlights onto the piece. And this one too. And there we go. So that's a before and after. So you can see this looks really nice, but now I'm able to punch it and add some interesting highlights in there, in which that these lights don't affect the whole scene. Okay, they are only going to affect the things that I put in there. And so I can do this with several things. I could do it on glass. Anytime that I have a specific thing to me that once I've rendered it, set the lights up and everything's really nice, but there's some things that aren't punching. A lot of times I do this with glass things that are in a room in which that the glass looks pretty good from the lights in there, but I want a specific highlight in a specific place. That's the illustrator in me wanting to, illustrate and to paint it the way I want it, and I don't want to have to relight the entire scene. So this little trick of being able to punch your highlights in your scene by using black shaders. If you use a matte black, then we won't be able to see it at all. I only have to do this if there's an occlusion in some way. Had this not passed behind this, then I wouldn't even need this shader. Okay, I only need it because I have to have this object in the scene to occlude that. And then I have my glossy black, and then I'm adjusting it, doing multiple renders. Okay, I can do multiple passes, multiple lights, and I'm using the really cool attribute in Max, which allows you to place a highlight. So all I'm doing is picking the light, and then I pick this, and then I click and hold down, and you'll see a little blue line pop out. That's kind of showing you where that light is. And then I can skate around till I get the highlight exactly where I want it. Maybe I want it about down here, maybe up there. And I can do multiple ones, okay? So this is a real cool little tool, being able to get specular highlights exactly where I want them. I can actually tone these too, which is an interesting thing, where you can come in here and say, well, I normally wouldn't want to change a color on something. I use it pretty natural, but there are times where I might want to come in and actually make some color specular in certain areas to pop things off, and we can do that too. Okay, as an example, I'm in this particular piece. I've set it up to be analogous colors, so colors on opposite sides of the color wheel, and so we're using a yellow and the opposite is a purple. So I might want to come in and put a purple bounce light coming off of here. Okay, so I could come in here and deal it into a purple range. And I would normally kick the purple up saturation pretty good, because then I can desaturate it once I bring the render in. Okay, and using the light lister, I can always isolate these. So if we come up here and bring the light lister in, then I can turn off all of these except the one that's got the purple. And so then when I render that, we've got that by itself, and I'm going to go ahead and let's go ahead. We need to switch this to a production render because I have them rendering different sizes. So let's render this really quick. I'm going to pause this while it renders, and then we'll drop it back on. Okay, so I finished with that render, and now I'm opening it in Photoshop. So here's the render, and so all we have right now is just those purple highlights in there. So now I can come in here, turn this on screen, and now you'll see this added me a little purple highlight into this. I can always adjust how much of that I want, and if I think it's a little too saturated, all we have to do is put a vibrance on it, and then I can deal with how saturated and vibrant that color is. So now this is very subtle things. These are subtle things, and these are the kind of things, this is the difference between creating something that looks pretty good and creating something that looks really great, is by taking the time and coming in and doing these little finishing touches. Okay, I hope that opened up some possibilities for you, and I appreciate you sharing your time with me today. Thank you very much.